What if Emperor Palpatine fell in love with Princess Leia? The Emperor's Obsession, a Star Wars fan fiction. Chapter 1. The Revelation. The obsidian walls of the Emperor's throne room seemed to pulse with malevolent energy as Palpatine sat in silent meditation, his gnarled fingers gripping the armrests of his chair with barely contained fury. The Death Star was gone, reduced to scattered debris floating in the void above Yavin. 1 million Imperial personnel dead. Grand Moff Tarkin dead. His ultimate weapon, the culmination of decades of planning and countless billions of credits, destroyed by a farm boy from Tatooine and a handful of rebel pilots. The stolen plans had found their way to the rebellion through the hands of a young woman. A princess, his spies had reported. Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan. He rolled the name across his mind like a dark prayer, savoring each syllable. Through the Force, he reached out across the galaxy, seeking the echoes of her presence that still lingered from her brief captivity aboard his battle station. The memory of her defiance during interrogation should have filled him with rage, another piece of the puzzle that led to his greatest defeat. Instead, what he found in those echoes made his yellow eyes snap open in surprise. There was something familiar about her Force signature, something that called to him in ways that had nothing to do with politics or military strategy or the cold pursuit of power. It was warm where he expected ice, bright where he anticipated shadow, and utterly, magnificently unbroken despite everything the Empire had done to her. How very curious indeed. Palpatine rose from his throne, his elaborate robes rustling in the chamber's silence. With measured steps, he approached the massive viewport that dominated the far wall, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape of Imperial Center. Somewhere out there, in the Outer Rim territories, Princess Organa was likely celebrating her victory with the other rebels. The thought should have filled him with murderous anger. She had cost him his greatest weapon and humiliated the Empire before the entire galaxy. Instead, it filled him with something far more dangerous: fascination. His mind drifted back to her interrogation aboard the Death Star, replaying every detail with the obsessive precision that had made him the galaxy's most dangerous politician. He had not been present for the sessions. Such mundane tasks were beneath an emperor, but he had felt the disturbance in the Force from across the galaxy. Vader's unusual reluctance to employ enhanced interrogation techniques, the strange tension that had filled Detention Level 5 whenever the princess was moved for questioning, the way his apprentice's breathing had changed whenever her name was mentioned in briefings. At the time, Palpatine had dismissed it as Vader's lingering sentiment, a weakness inherited from Anakin Skywalker's pathetic attachment to mercy and justice. The fallen Jedi had been too emotionally invested, a trait that had made him useful during the Clone Wars, but tiresome afterward. But now, reviewing those memories through the lens of recent revelations, he understood the truth that had eluded him. The girl was Vader's daughter. Skywalker blood flowed through her veins, making her naturally strong in the Force, and possessed of that particular brand of stubborn courage that seemed to be a genetic inheritance of her lineage. More than that, she possessed something that had become increasingly rare in the Emperor's experience: genuine defiance, born not from stupidity or desperation, but from unshakable principle. She had looked Grand Moff Tarkin in the eye, and watched her homeworld burn, rather than betray the location of the rebel base. Even under interrogation, even facing the mind probe, she had maintained her composure with a strength that reminded him of another Skywalker, before that one's fall to the dark side. Her will was like tempered steel, flexible enough to bend under pressure, but strong enough to spring back to its original shape once that pressure was removed. What exquisite potential, he mused, closing his eyes and reaching deeper into the Force. What magnificent, untapped potential. In the swirling currents of possible futures that surrounded all living beings, he caught glimpses of what Princess Leia Organa could become. Flashes of a woman standing beside a throne, his throne dark hair crowned with silver circlets that caught the light like stars. Brown eyes that held both compassion and the kind of ruthless calculation necessary to rule a galaxy. A lightsaber at her side that hummed with controlled power. Its blade neither the blue of the Jedi nor the red of the Sith, but something entirely new. She turned to look at him in the vision, and her smile was both terrible and beautiful, the expression of someone who understood the true cost of power and had chosen to pay it anyway. Empress Organa. The vision faded, but its impact remained like a brand against his consciousness. For the first time in decades, Emperor Palpatine felt something he had thought long buried beneath years of Sith conditioning and political maneuvering. Desire that had nothing to do with domination over others, and everything to do with wanting someone to choose freely, willingly to stand beside him. A slow, predatory smile spread across his withered features as the implications cascaded through his mind. The princess had cost him his ultimate weapon and dealt the Empire its first major defeat. By all rights, she should be his most hated enemy, marked for death or worse. Instead, she had become something far more intriguing, a puzzle he intended to solve, a challenge he intended to overcome, a woman he intended to claim, not through force or coercion, as he might have taken any other prize. Those crude methods were for lesser beings, for those who lacked the subtlety to appreciate what they were acquiring. No, this required a more sophisticated approach. Princess Leia. Organa was no weak-minded fool to be swayed by simple mind tricks or intimidated by threats of violence. She was a leader, a strategist, someone who understood power and its applications. Someone worthy of respect even as he planned her seduction to the dark side. She would come to him eventually. He would ensure it. But when she did, it would be because she had chosen to do so, because she had finally understood that what he offered was not subjugation, but partnership. Not the end of her principles, but their ultimate expression on a galactic scale. Patience, he reminded himself, though the word tasted strange in his mouth. Great works require time to reach completion. But as he stood before the viewport, watching the lights of Imperial Center twinkle like distant stars, Emperor Palpatine found himself wondering if he had finally encountered something that might prove more challenging to obtain than the galaxy itself had been. The thought, he realized with surprise, thrilled him more than anything had in years. Chapter 2. The Manipulation. Months passed like a fever dream of carefully orchestrated chaos, and the Emperor found himself restructuring Imperial operations around a single secret objective, drawing Princess Leia into increasingly elaborate games of cat and mouse. From his private study adjacent to the throne room, he maintained a holographic display that tracked rebel movements across the galaxy, with one particular green marker following the path of Princess Leia Organa, wherever her missions took her. He began feeding carefully calculated intelligence to rebel spies information that would lead their strike teams into traps, but traps designed with hidden escape routes that only someone with her particular combination of tactical brilliance and moral conviction could exploit. Each near capture was an opportunity to observe her, to study the way she moved through danger with grace and determination, to watch her grow stronger under pressure. The intelligence reports painted a picture of a woman who could inspire desperate hope in defeated soldiers, who could outthink Imperial strategists twice her age, and who possessed an intuitive understanding of logistics that would have been impressive in a Grand Admiral. More intriguingly, she was beginning to show signs of force sensitivity in combat situations, nothing overt enough to attract attention from his inquisitors, but clear enough to someone who knew what to look for. She dodged blaster fire with uncanny timing, seemed to sense ambushes moments before they were sprung, and had an almost supernatural ability to find weak points in Imperial formations. Her tactical successes were becoming the stuff of legend among rebel forces, But Palpatine knew the truth. Every victory, every narrow escape, every moment of triumph was a gift he had carefully arranged. "She is wasted on this pathetic rebellion," he mused during one of his surveillance sessions, watching holographic footage of her leading a desperate evacuation from Sulust. Such strength, such natural leadership, she belongs at the seat of power, not hiding in asteroid fields and jungle bases. The Emperor began to rationalize his growing fixation with the cold logic that had served him throughout his rise to power. Leia Organa possessed everything he valued. Intelligence sharp enough to cut through the lies that most beings told themselves, ruthlessness when necessary, but tempered by genuine understanding, an unbreakable will that had been tested in the crucible of loss and emerged stronger, and most importantly, a connection to the Force that could be cultivated into something magnificent. She would make the perfect consort for a Sith Emperor, once she understood the futility of her current cause and the superiority of what he could offer her. Through his network of spies and deep-cover agents, he watched her rally dispirited rebels after crushing defeats, make impossible tactical decisions that somehow worked out in her favor, and emerge from each Imperial victory with her principles intact, but her methods growing more sophisticated. She was learning, adapting, evolving from the idealistic senator's adoptive daughter who had died with Alderaan into something harder and more dangerous. Exactly as I intended, he thought with satisfaction. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Leia found herself increasingly frustrated with Imperial intelligence capabilities. It seemed that no matter how carefully the rebellion planned their operations, how many security protocols they followed, or how much they compartmentalized their information, the Empire was always one step ahead. Ships appeared where they shouldn't be. Patrols materialized at the worst possible moments. Supply convoys arrived with perfect timing to disrupt rebel raids. Yet somehow she kept finding ways to slip through their nets, often by the narrowest of margins. Her transports suffered convenient mechanical failures that delayed them just long enough to avoid Imperial interdiction fleets. Her communications were jammed at precisely the right moments to avoid eavesdropping. Enemy commanders made tactical errors that seemed almost deliberate in their timing. It was as if someone was playing both sides of the war, feeding the Empire information about rebel operations while simultaneously ensuring that key personnel like herself always had an escape route available. The thought chilled her more than outright capture would have, because it suggested a level of manipulation that went far beyond normal military intelligence. Her suspicions were confirmed during a supposedly covert mission to steal Imperial encryption codes from a communications relay station orbiting Kessel. Intelligence provided by sources she had believed trustworthy indicated the facility was lightly defended and contained information vital to upcoming rebel operations. What should have been a simple infiltration became a nightmare when Imperial forces surrounded the facility within minutes of her arrival. But instead of the expected boarding parties of stormtroopers, a single figure emerged from the shadows of the primary control room, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who had orchestrated every detail of their meeting. Emperor Palpatine stood before her, his yellow eyes gleaming with something that made her skin crawl. Not hatred or anger, but something far more unsettling. His elaborate ceremonial robes had been replaced by simple black clothing that made him look less like a galactic dictator and more like someone's grandfather, an effect that was deeply disturbing in its normalcy. "Princess," he said, his voice carrying that silky whisper she remembered from Senate sessions before the Empire's rise. "How lovely to finally meet you properly, without the inconvenience of interrogation chambers or diplomatic protocols." Leia's hand moved instinctively to her blaster, but Palpatine raised a pale hand in a gesture of mock peace, his expression holding what might have been genuine amusement. "Please, there's no need for violence between us. I simply wanted to express my admiration for your recent work. Such dedication to a hopeless cause. such exquisite defiance in the face of inevitable defeat. His smile was predatory, but there was something else there, something that looked disturbingly like pride. "You remind me of someone I once knew, someone with the potential for true greatness. If only they could see past their limitations." "I'd rather die than listen to your propaganda," Leia spat, backing toward the emergency exit while keeping her weapon trained on his center mass. "Propaganda?" Palpatine chuckled, the sound somehow more unsettling than any threat. "My dear princess, I speak only the truth, something that has become regrettably rare in our current political climate. The rebellion will fall, as all rebellions ultimately do. The mathematics of warfare are quite unforgiving in that regard. But you—" His eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. "You could be so much more than a martyr for a lost cause." The way he said it, not as a threat or a taunt, but as if he were offering her something precious sent ice through her veins. This wasn't the ranting of a madman or the cold calculation of a military strategist. This was something personal, intimate in a way that made her feel physically ill. "What do you want?" she demanded, her finger hovering over the trigger. "What I have always wanted, Princess Order. Peace. An end to the senseless violence that has torn this galaxy apart for far too long." His tone grew almost gentle, as if he were explaining something obvious to a beloved student. "The difference is that I have recently come to realize that such goals require more than military might or political manipulation. They require someone who understands both the burden of leadership and the price of compassion. Someone like you, I suppose. Someone like you." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge, and Leia felt something shift in the Force, not threatening, but expectant, as if the universe itself were holding its breath to see what she would say next. Leia triggered the door mechanism and sprinted into the corridor, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. Behind her, she heard no sounds of pursuit, no running footsteps, no shouted orders, no hum of charging weapons, only the Emperor's soft laughter echoing off the metal walls, following her like a ghost. He was letting her go. Again. The realization filled her with a terror deeper than any she had felt during torture or battle, because it meant that everything, every narrow escape, every perfectly timed rescue, every stroke of tactical brilliance that had made her a legend among the rebels had been orchestrated by the man she thought she was fighting. She was not the hunter. She was the prey. And worse, she was prey that her predator found too interesting to kill. As she reached her hidden ship and began the frantic process of escape, one thought echoed in her mind with crystalline clarity. This is not over. This will never be over. Not until one of us is dead. But even as she fled into hyperspace, Princess Leia Organa found herself wondering which of them would ultimately prove to be the survivor, and whether she would still recognize herself when that final confrontation came. Chapter 3. The Strategic Retreat. The final confrontation came during the rebellion's desperate assault on the second Death Star above the forest moon of Endor, as the galaxy's fate hung in the balance between freedom and eternal tyranny. While Admiral Akbar's fleet engaged the Imperial Armada in the space above, and Han Solo's strike team fought through the ancient forests below, Leia found herself drawn to the battle station by dreams that felt more like visions, terrifying glimpses of Luke in mortal danger, facing something far darker than mere physical death. The nightmares had been growing stronger for weeks. Images of her brother's face twisted with rage, the snap hiss of crossing lightsabers, and always, the Emperor's soft laughter echoing through what looked like a throne room carved from shadow and malice. She had tried to dismiss them as stress-induced anxiety, but the Force, and she could no longer pretend it was anything else, sang with urgent warning whenever she closed her eyes. Luke was walking into a trap. More than that, he was walking into a trap specifically designed to break him. to transform him into something he would never be able to forgive himself for becoming. And somehow, in ways she didn't fully understand, that trap was connected to the strange game the Emperor had been playing with her for months. She had stolen aboard an Imperial shuttle during the chaos of the main assault, using codes obtained through sources she no longer entirely trusted. The Death Star's corridors were a maze of emergency lighting and automated defenses, but she moved through them with growing confidence, guided by instincts that had nothing to do with her intelligence training and everything to do with the power flowing through her bloodline. When the turbolift doors opened onto what should have been the Emperor's throne room, she found herself instead in an elegant chamber she didn't recognize. Smaller than the public audience hall, decorated with art and artifacts that spoke of personal taste rather than state function. And there, rising from a meditation chair with obvious pleasure, was Emperor Palpatine. "You came," he said, and the genuine warmth in his voice was somehow more unsettling than any threat. "I wondered if you would sense your brother's peril in time to act upon it." "Where is Luke?" Leia demanded, her stolen Imperial blaster trained on the Emperor's heart, though she suspected it would do little good if he decided to stop her. "Safe, for the moment. Engaging Lord Vader in the traditional dance of father and son, a confrontation that has been building for some time." Palpatine moved closer, seemingly unconcerned by her weapon, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture of casual confidence. "But that is not why you're here, my dear. You're here because the Force has shown you the same truth it has shown me, that we are meant for something greater than this petty conflict." "You're insane," Leia said. But even as the words left her mouth, she could feel the truth of his statement resonating through the Force like a struck bell. "Am I? Look around you, Princess. Your rebellion is dying despite all its noble intentions. Your fleet burns above us, while brave pilots throw their lives away against impossible odds. Your friends fall on the forest moon below, overwhelmed by forces they never understood." His voice carried genuine sorrow, as if these losses pained him personally. All of this could end all the death, all the suffering, all the senseless waste, if you simply accepted what you know to be inevitable. Palpatine extended his hand toward her, palm up in a gesture of offering rather than command. "Rule beside me. Bring order to this chaotic galaxy as my Empress. Use your strength, your intelligence, your growing connection to the Force for something greater than this doomed cause that has already cost you everything you once held dear." Leia's finger tightened on the trigger, but she found herself unable to fire. Not because of any external influence, but because part of her, a part she desperately wanted to deny, found his offer genuinely tempting. The resources to rebuild not just Alderaan, but every world the war had scarred. The power to ensure that no other children grew up as orphans because of political violence. The chance to heal rather than simply fight. "I've seen your idea of order, Emperor," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "I've seen the ashes of Alderaan. I've watched good people die fighting your tyranny. Whatever twisted fantasy you've constructed about me, about us, it's built on the bones of billions." "Sentiment," Palpatine dismissed, but his tone remained oddly gentle. "You think in such small terms, my dear. A few worlds, a few billion lives. What are they compared to the stability of an eternal empire? The peace that could last for millennia? The prevention of wars that would kill trillions rather than billions?" He took another step closer, and Leia could see something almost vulnerable in his yellow eyes. "Together, we could build something that neither of us could achieve alone. Your idealism, tempered by my experience. My power, guided by your conscience." For one terrifying moment, Leia found herself actually considering the offer. The vision he painted was seductive in its scope and possibility, an empire transformed from within, its vast resources redirected toward healing rather than oppression, its might used to protect rather than subjugate. She could see herself standing in this very chamber, no longer as a prisoner or a rebel, but as a partner in something greater than the sum of its parts. Then she remembered the screams of her people as Alderaan died, the faces of the friends she had lost to imperial cruelty, the billions who had suffered under the system he wanted her to help perfect. "You speak of sentiment as if caring about people were a weakness," she said, her voice cutting through his persuasive words like a blade. "But that's exactly what's wrong with your empire. You see beings as statistics, worlds as resources to be managed, lives as acceptable losses in service of some greater design. You can dress it up in whatever philosophical language you want, but you're asking me to become complicit in the same system that murdered my family and destroyed my world." Palpatine's expression shifted subtly, disappointment rather than anger, as if she had failed to understand something important he was trying to teach her. "And yet, you fight with weapons that kill, plan strategies that result in death, make choices that condemn some to save others. How are you different from me, except in the scale of your responsibilities?" The question hit harder than Leia had expected, touching on doubts that had plagued her since taking command of rebel operations. How many Imperial soldiers had died in raids she had planned? How many civilians had suffered when supply lines she disrupted carried medical supplies along with military equipment? How many difficult choices had she made that would have horrified the idealistic senator's adoptive daughter she had been before Alderaan's destruction? "The difference," she said finally, "is choice. The people who serve the Empire, the soldiers who die in battle, they made a choice to take up arms. My people on Alderaan chose only to live free. You took that choice away from them, just as you're trying to take choice away from the entire galaxy." "Choice?" Palpatine's laugh was soft and bitter. "How much choice does a farm boy from Tatooine have when Imperial recruiters offer him steady pay and regular meals? How much choice does a recent Academy graduate have when assigned to a posting he knows nothing about? You speak of choice as if everyone in this galaxy has the luxury of your privileged upbringing, Princess." Before Leia could respond, the Emperor stopped mid-sentence, his head tilting as if listening to something only he could hear. Through the Force, she felt it too, a familiar presence approaching rapidly, blazing with rage and determination, and something that felt disturbingly like the dark side itself. Luke was coming. Her brother was racing toward this confrontation with all the desperate fury of someone who had lost everything, and Leia could sense the darkness reaching out to welcome him. Palpatine's expression shifted from ardent persuasion to cold calculation, the mask of the kindly mentor slipping to reveal the Sith Lord beneath. "How unfortunate. It seems young Skywalker has overcome his father more quickly than anticipated, and with far less control than I had hoped." The Emperor moved toward a concealed exit that Leia hadn't noticed before, his movements suddenly those of a predator who had decided to abandon one hunt in favor of easier prey. "This is not over, Princess. Your brother's arrival has merely postponed our discussion." "There will be no discussion," Leia said firmly. "Today, tomorrow, or ever." Palpatine paused at the threshold, his withered features twisting into something that might have been disappointment or might have been promise. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You will regret this choice, Princess, when your precious rebellion lies in ashes, when your friends are dead, and your brother has fallen to the dark side. You will remember this moment. You will remember that I offered you a chance to save them all." His voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to echo in her bones, carrying with it the force of prophecy. "And when that day comes, when you have nowhere else to turn and no one else to blame, you will come to me willingly." The Emperor vanished into the shadows like smoke. leaving Leia alone with the sound of approaching footsteps and the terrible certainty that she had not seen the last of Palpatine's obsession. As Luke's presence grew stronger in the Force, she holstered her weapon and moved toward the throne room, knowing that while this battle might be won, a far more personal war had only just begun. Behind her, in the chamber where the most powerful man in the galaxy had just offered her half his empire, the silence seemed to whisper with unspoken possibilities.